Hello and welcome to the LINK Changemaker Series. As many of you know, we started this series a few years back to connect some of the best changemakers leading really true, authentic change in communities around the country and around the world. We are today in San Juan, Puerto Rico as part of the Festival of the Diaspora with a really great panel where we're going to dig into what multi-generational workforces look like. Why is it important to have everyone, not just in a symbolic way, but in a real way, working together to make workplaces, cultures, organizations the best they can be? We got a phenomenal panel here today, so I'm going to go down and have each person introduce themselves, and we're going to jump in. President Gates, can you kick us off?
Definitely kick us off. I'm Angie Gates. I'm the president and CEO of Events DC, the official convention and sports authority of Washington, DC.
Teniqua Broughton. I serve as the CEO for the state of Black Arizona, where we use culture to make sense of data, to make change and action for those issues and concerns across Arizona.
Mr. Early?
Hi, my name is Jay Early. I am a senior media relations specialist at LINK Strategic Partners, and I have the honor of working with Michael Aiken.
Mr. Gary?
I'm Gary Officer. I'm the CEO of the Center for Workforce Inclusion, and I'm also the founder and CEO of CWI Labs. Our work is all things workforce and all things workforce opportunity for older Americans.
Excellent. So I've got one question that I'm going to ask all of us and then some custom questions for each of you. So the first question, so we talk a lot about investing across generations, from youth to legends, which is a phrase that you use a lot, which I love. What does that look like in practice in the work in your organization? Who would like to start on that one?
Let me jump in here.
Okay, Jay.
I think it's intentionality at every touch point. It's providing an opportunity, as we see 5 generations in the workspace right now, to lead, learn, fail, and grow. And when you can do that across 5 generations, no matter what stage of your career that you're in, and you can share that with other people who may not be at the same place that you are, that's where we really see that intentionality take place and move people's careers and perspectives forward.
Lead, learn, fail, grow. I really like that. So at LINK, where Jay and I get to be colleagues, and I learn from him every day, our youngest employee, I think, currently is 16. We have a very strong partnership with some youth employment programs called Urban Alliance, the Marion Barry Summer Youth Employment Program, and our oldest employee is 98 years old, an amazing guy named Charlie Brotman, but those aren't outliers. We have every generation really intentionally represented at the firm. Ms. Gates, what's it look like at Events DC?
So we've taken a listen and launch approach, listening to the needs of the community and really launching what's necessary to bridge any generational gaps that exist, particularly from the events approach. So we made it a point to not only engage youth across the board, and our legends, as I refer. Some people say older adults, some people say seniors. I say legends, specifically because they have laid the foundation for where we are today. And so we've taken an intentional approach and made investments of developing programming that brings all ages together. Typically, music will get you out and about. And so we've hosted like the Legends Ball, and we've hosted youth engagement from an artistic perspective. In DC, we celebrate the cherry blossoms. So we've done a sneaker kicks for kids, and where they've designed sneakers, but just made it a part of the conversation as well.
So you're bringing it not just from a workforce standpoint of who you hire and employ, but the communities and the opportunities for engagement across generations.
Absolutely. And we also have the Events DC Academy, where we have provided training, but also with training, we've provided the opportunity to work and have a job. And we've been very strategic in engaging our legends, as well as veterans and returning citizens.
I love the legends framing. Teniqua, what's it look like at State of Black Arizona?
All right. Well, I'm going to use sort of an anecdote of what I learned as a former athlete. So my coach used to always say, and I think this is how I lead with teams, is use them as much as they are using you. So when you think about the different generations, It is about coming into workplaces and recognizing it's not just about your talent that you are giving them, but also how it is ROI on both sides. And so I think you have to change your way of thinking about the currency that you earn there, and being able to think about how all the skills that you give, you also can take away and take that to the next job, and or take that to your own business. And so it really is about going into it with the mindset that there's opportunity, and there is an ability for legacy if you think about the way you show up from generation to generation. So that's how I would share it.
I love that. Gary, this is both your practice and your vocation. What's it look like to you?
Thank you. It's actually pretty bleak, to be honest with you. I think the only place where we're seeing, and first of all, so for the first time in our nation's history, there are 5 generations of Americans in the workforce. 5 generations of Americans are in today's workforce, the first time ever. The only outlier in this conversation around how we can foster productive intergenerational work teams is in sports. So I wrote an article a few years ago where I mentioned that in the Olympic Games, Steph Curry, LeBron James, and Kevin Durant powered the U.S. team across the line for the gold medal. Right? They were the anchors around which the team was built. Right. At the last World Cup, Lionel Messi, at 36 years old, was the architect of Argentina's World Cup victory, supported by a core of younger athletes. Yep. Sports is the outlier. In the workforce, however, we're seeing some significant challenges. Let me break this down for you. Yep. So we have about $8 billion in this country that's appropriated annually to support workforce training. By all independent measure and or analysis, that $8 billion exclusively goes towards younger job seekers. There is one program out there, the Senior Community Employment Program, funded at about $398 million, that goes towards older Americans 54 and over. $395 million versus $8 billion that goes towards younger. How does it play itself out? If you study the monthly jobs report every year from the Department of Labor for the last 12 months, you will see a rolling average unemployment rate for older Americans 54 and over of roughly 3 times the national average. If you study the same jobs report, rolling 12-month average, you will find the labor force participation rate, which is the true measure around which we measure how many people are really in the workforce, for older Americans, is 36%. Right? So there's a correlation between workforce investment and workforce success for older job seekers. And if we on the government side are deficient in investing in workforce training to ensure opportunity, then how can we expect corporations to behave any differently, right? So that's a challenge we face.
Yep. I'm going to stick with you while you've got the microphone. So you've diagnosed using data and real evidence what the problem is.
Often accused of that.
No,
yes.
it's good. It's good. You know, we need more data-informed decisions these days, don't we? Right?
Yes, we
Assumptions can only get you so far. So you've outlined the problem really well. If someone's leading an organization or advising an organization on how to do it better, what are some of the best practices you can point to for including in a real and authentic and kind of bottom line driven way workers of a certain generation into your workforce? What does that look like?
That's a great question, and I'm asked that quite often, and I struggle to render a response, because in truth, we have a culture that is not age-friendly. We have a culture where hiring managers basically hire younger versions of themselves. Unless the CEO and or the C-suite is intentional about the kind of environment they want to foster by way of their hiring practices, it's hard to find, right, the kind of workplace you are alluding to. So I've worked in places where I would study who's coming through the door. I'll be asking the staff, why aren't there more people like X being hired? Why are we seeing more of them being hired? Why are you talking about what happened on Friday night at the happy hour, right, with your latest hire? And is that a reflection of your values and preferences, right? So the C-suite has to take a more active role in monitoring the kind of both culture and who we hire to ensure that we are creating an environment that is inclusive of all age groups.
One thing that's interesting to me, and Jay, I'm going to jump to you. At LINK, in terms of practical, specific advice, Jay came into our orbit through our associate program, which is our paid professional internship program. Now, once we realized that to be truly multi-generational, one of the hardest things is the access point, right? How do you get into a firm? So once we took this associate program and said, wait, does this just have to be a college program? Could it be a high school program? Could it be a retiree program? Could it be a postdoc program? Could it be I am without work, which is a big deal in our part of the world right now with all the federal government workers, very accomplished federal government workers looking for things. So once we reposition that from an internship to an associateship program, a paid professional short-term program, the number of applications we got from older Americans, retirees who wanted to come back into the workforce, changed just by making sure they knew that that program wasn't for someone else. And that's how we've generated a tremendous amount of folk coming into our firm who have added huge value. But can you talk a little bit about what that looked like for you?
Yeah, so I was introduced by a former colleague of LINK and brought me in and said, I see where you are in journalism school. I see where you are with your social impact certificate, and I think this is an opportunity that would align with you. So, we had a conversation. I interviewed for the associateship program, and I was amazed at the diversity that I saw at this firm coming in as a college sophomore, right? I saw people that were in their 60s and 70s. I saw people that were also in their teens or early and mid 20s or in their 30s, and all different positions at the firm. So the associateship program provided access, and that's really what multi-generational leadership should be. It should be about providing access to people at various stages of your leadership journey. And like I said earlier, it's making sure that you're taking the lessons and experiences that you have and that you've learned and sharing them with people that may not be in the same generation as you, may not use the same technology as you, may not listen to the same music as you. It's all about building perspective and bringing that back into the workplace, along with accessibility.
One of the things I found in that, and I'm sharing this with permission, right? So one of the cornerstones of our firm is a woman named Carol Lambert, our Director of Mission Optimization.
Yes.
Carol's incredible. Carol and Jay have also established one of the closest professional and personal bonds I've found. And so, again, sharing this with permission, you have Carol, who's been in the workforce for 3 times longer than Jay's been alive.
This is true.
And they have come up with a bond that started in the office and then became a personal friendship that is carried back into the professional setting. I wonder if you could just expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, so, let's go back to college. So, when I was working for LINK as an undergrad, East Coast, West Coast hours, there's a 3-4 hour difference, right? So oftentimes I would text Carol in the morning and she'd be the first person that I'd speak to when I wake up. Hey, I have a question on this. Can you give me some guidance around this? And, a little chit chat here, a little chit chat there. And Carol, as you know, wakes up notoriously early, right?
4 a.m. I get
4
my first
a.m.,
text from
3
Carol every
a.m.
morning at 4 a.m.
And that's usually,
Not a joke. Every morning at 4 a.m. Just like clockwork.
1 a.m. on the West Coast, right? So I'd say, hey, I'm wrapping this up. Do you have any insights knowing that she would be up, right? So she'd often be the first person I'd speak to in the morning and the last person I'd speak to at night. And our friendship and our camaraderie has just expanded from that. We'll go on work trips together and we will ditch Michael and go and find a salad. I think we did that in New Orleans. We've worked together in Arizona and we found, met very amazing and interesting people with interesting stories through our work in Arizona with Enchant when we were working on that project. And, just in DC, we find time to actually take time out of work, and I'm sharing this with permission too, occasionally post up, maybe at a happy hour with our laptop, and we'll just sit and we'll talk and we'll work. And it's providing opportunities like that, which you do at all of our retreats, in order to get to know each other. That's where we get to build that camaraderie, right? That's where we get to build that relationship.
I love that. So it works because Carol's getting up when you're going to bed, and you
well, when
share
you
a
put it that
value of
way,
brown liquor. That's what I took.
it
away
works
from
because
that.
we learn from each other.
I love it. I love it. Teniqua, Jay mentioned Arizona, and so I want to go to your work at State of Black Arizona. Your work really centers around investing in culture and community capital. How does cultural investment strengthen multi-generational prosperity in our communities?
Absolutely. I want to go back to something Gary said, because I think to answer this question, I first want to start with the thought of we need to respect data as much as we respect intuition, because a lot of times we are saying that we are using the data to make decisions, but as a person who is leading a culturally specific organization, I have to use the data to actually get in front of people to understand why it's so important to support the community that I represent in Arizona. Being a part of the margins, unfortunately, with being 5%, I am often having to have conversations about why we need to be at the table, why it is important not to make a decision off of the entire group of people of color, but to allow me to show you the specifics of why this particular community is different than the next community because of our ecosystems in Arizona. And so I would say the work when it relates to the multi-generations, I'm making sure, because there's so much migration to Arizona, it's literally almost 50-50, Michael. So that means people are coming from other places. They don't know the history of African Americans in Arizona. So our African American Leadership Institute is so critical to 10 weeks of knowledge and skill building, because even the person who is in the oldest generation to the person who is just in the workforce all don't know that about Arizona. And we found you cannot lead spaces where you work, play, or live without understanding that historical part. Yeah. And then the other part is the data part, which is where we try to make sense of the data through culture, not just looking at the data as an analyst and saying, well, this is what we see and this is what it is for that group of people, but understanding that there are layers to that data that maybe only me or folks who are similar understand what that means deeper than just this is what it is across the board when you synthesize it. So there is a lot of understanding that I try to provide, like when people say Black people are doing really good, when it looks like the number in Arizona when it comes to median income is higher than the national average. Well, that's not the story. It's easy to make a story out of that. But we know that as taxpayers, we change the median income so that there was equality for everyone. Well, while it did increase 8% for African Americans, it increased 31% for the majority. And so there's that, and understanding that post-secondary attainment is happening for those who migrate and not necessarily. So that is just an example of trying to make sense of culture, to let people know it's not as easy of just saying, check, everyone's doing great in this community. And then also making sure people understand, when we go back to respecting data as intuition, if you say you know the data, use the data. So I am looking at the generations before me, not to do the same thing, even though we see a little bit of that recycling at the moment, but to understand that it's not for messaging or just to put up, but strategy and problem solving. And so how do we think about the work that we're doing for those multi-generation investments to not do the same thing? So if we are sharing in a business report, this is how you need to think about wealth building, we would hope that you use that as a strategy, not just to say it, but to do it, so that we can change those numbers from year to year or from period to period.
I love that. And for those of you watching at home and wondering why it just turned into a pool party, as I mentioned, we are at the Festival of the Diaspora in San Juan, Puerto Rico, with a multi-generational playlist going on behind us. It is all good stuff. That data point I think is so fascinating because data without context doesn't help, but context without data also doesn't help, right? And so those two things together. I want to pass to you, President Gates. Teniqua talked a bit about the Academy and the Leadership Academy. You have the EDC Fellows, the Events DC Academy. Can you talk a little bit about that in terms of bringing new people into the field? But then you also created the Legends Ball, which is about honoring folks who've done this before. Talk about how those two fit together.
Well, one of the first things I want to talk about is Carol. Clearly, I need a Carol on the Events DC team. let's just start there. I just first want to, especially with this being Women's History Month, I want to pay homage to the matriarch of our family, Mary Gates. But for us, I thought it was very important to reach different demographics that really were not in existence. So from a hospitality and tourism perspective, we were so focused, and we continue to be focused on the individuals that are booking hotel rooms, that are traveling to Washington, D.C., that are patronizing the restaurants, and focusing on who's coming versus focusing on creating. I call it the other C. So yes, we want the people to come, but we also had a due diligence to create. And so we were very intentional in creating the Events DC Academy for Events DC, especially like after COVID in the hospitality industry. It was somewhat of a challenge finding consistency in the workforce and finding that customer service element that will make people continue to patronize your business. So we developed the Events DC Academy and utilized that as an opportunity to train up. And what we found by listening was most people would have the experience or will have trained, but then the job opportunities were not there. And so we had to put our money where our mouth is and not only provide the training resources for the Events DC Academy, but then leverage that up and partner with organizations and entities to help with the job and create an investment in that person's salary for a year to make sure that there was a job at the end of that training, because quite often if you have the experience, you have the training, but you don't have that opportunity to showcase those talents, then it can be very, you can feel very defeated. It can sometimes play a little game on your psyche when you keep hearing the repetitive of no. So we make sure all 100% of our graduates from the Events DC Academy is gifted with a job at the end of the program. In addition to that, as I mentioned, we use the term legends. And so it was important for us to pay homage to the legends. They're individuals like Virginia Ali, who have Ben's Chili Bowl on U Street, the legends of the Lee family, who have the Lee Flower Shop. And so we wanted to pay homage to the legends. And during that period of time, I had been at Events DC, and I looked at the landscape of all of our events. I was like, we're not opening a door or an opportunity or anything to gather our legends together. And the Legends Ball, just to see people come in their finest fare and to have a good time and, talk about the old days, but to be able to drop knowledge on the younger generations that was, there at the ball and spread some wisdom and opportunity. It was a really great way for not only, the legends, but especially the Events DC team for us to come together and learn some things. We're looking to expand the Legends Ball into a weekend affair. And so similar to music being a universal factor, it's amazing. I didn't know how game nights meant so much to legends. I'm like, and they take it like extremely serious. So everything from pinochle to spades to, bingo. Yeah, bingo is in there, but bingo is in there. But I mean, they kick it with these old school like dominoes. You would be surprised. Dominoes, all of it. And so we've incorporated game night in this. We did a little test run with chess, and it was so good to see someone from high school playing chess with one of our legends at one of our rec centers. And it was just important to create that opportunity of dialogue. And when you often see two people sitting together, similar to what you and Carol has done, when you look after the event is over and people are just talking, just to look at those nuggets and words of wisdom that they drop on each other. So the Events DC Academy and the Legends Ball, that was the action and the catalyst to be intention to, bridge that generational opportunity. But the takeaway in the end can be life-changing for all involved.
I love that. One of the things I think, and I'm going to ask you all as we wrap here in a second, to think forward, right? If we got this right, what would that look like? But one of the things I've found, having the real honor and pleasure of helping to lead a multi-generational workforce, is we have to take all the assumptions that we have about each other and just set them aside and work on letting people be people. So the same challenges that our youngest employees have often mirror the same challenge our older employees have. And it very specifically, I get a lot of our younger employees say, everyone here thinks I'm set in my ways and I'm unchangeable and they think I know it all. And then you talk to some of our legend employees and they say, everyone here thinks I'm set in my ways and they think I know it all. And that's really interesting. And as we've digested that, right, what does that mean for a legend employee? It means people think that when I say something, it's gospel. I need some space to get it wrong and learn too, right? And when younger people say, when they think I know it all, they don't think I know anything, right? You need to have room for both. Gary.
That's very true. And you're speaking about the soft skills,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
And that's important. And we often find in the workforce space, it's the soft skills, it's the interpersonal skills, it's the problem-solving skills that older workers tend to bring. We haven't mentioned AI. Right, and no discussion about the future of work can exclude a reference to the transformative effect of AI. And by all measure, from the World Economic Forum to Goldman Sachs, they've all said the same thing. There'll be a massive amount of disruption and changes to occupations over the next 10 years because of AI. Some occupations will disappear, some will change markedly. But those who will be impacted the most are people who are older. So how can we prepare a workforce with the tools and the skills to adapt to the transformative nature of AI? How can we use our social and soft skills to complement AI as the tool through which we are working and functioning in the workforce? How do we recognize equity and the needs of groups that too frequently are left out of training programs and ignored by hiring managers, which may exacerbate pre-existing disparities? I mean, so in closing, my optimism is tempered by the reality of contemporary experiences. And to do better, we have to learn from the past, recognize our blind spots, and apply resources where necessary.
I think that's spot on, and it gives us a really good way to look forward. We'll go to Teniqua next. One of the observations I have is often, how do we reframe challenges into opportunities? So maybe a younger generation has the technology understanding to best implement an AI-powered solution, but an older worker has lived through the last 7 versions of whatever the next big revolution was in their career, right? So in many ways, they're deeply flexible and adaptable. We just have to upskill on the technical side, where your employees are upskilled on the technical side, but need to understand, take this seriously, but also this too shall pass into what's next, into what's next, and into what's next. What do you think, looking forward? What does this look like, let's say, 20 years out?
Okay, so 20 years out, I want to comment on that because I think you can't be a really good leader without putting yourself into reverse mentorship.
Yeah.
You need to have people across those different generations. I learn constantly from Jay all the time. And I have to say, it helps me understand where my workforce or certain employees are in that space. But when I look out 20 years from now, I think it is a mindset thing. So when it comes to my work and trying to represent a group of people, I think about narrative changes. System changes, it is a huge, massive piece we constantly say we need to do. But I think what we can do, I'm going to give you, is the narrative change. We can work on changing how people think, speak about us, because we are changing our mindset. To that, we have to look at currency different. We need a new relationship with money. If this is about investing just in general, whether it's your workforce for your family or your life, but you're looking at that. We have been using a concept called Afrofuturism, working with Ingrid LaFloyd, and we've had our leaders really think about what would Black Arizonans look like in 2050. And so from our different 5 indicator areas of civic life to economics to healthcare to infrastructure, and then education, they have really compiled these images through AI to say this is what it would look like if we were liberated and in control of our own lives and our own destinies. So I would say to you, it really is about mindset and the ability to feel liberated to make the change, recognizing that the one thing that I can control is myself and my action.
Yeah, I love that, and I know you've got some imagery that backs that up from the work that we're sharing on the screen right now as well. But that's really, really interesting work, and would love to continue that dialogue. President Gates, look forward. What's it look like if we get this right?
So the one comment that I just want to make from the top is that the only thing that's constant is change.
Yes.
That's the one thing that's constant is change. And when you talk about AI, like AI wasn't even a topic of my discussion 2 years ago. But one of the things that I think is important, where you are today is what dictates where you'll be in 5 years, where you'll be in 20 years. And I can just say for me, the one thing that's been most valuable is never just have that ability to have communication and respect in that communication. So I was committed when I first came on at Events DC is to have a one-on-one conversation with every single employee collecting a check. And the one benefit that I quickly noticed is when I talked to the employee that had been with the organization 35 years and then have a meeting and a conversation with the employee that's been there 3 months, is how I had a takeaway from each individual, and was able to start making the necessary short-term changes in order to have a long-term impact. So when I think about where we are going to be in 20 years, I think about where I have to be now. And so when I'm seated at the table and the chairs that's pulled up around the table is no different than what we're talking about right here today, looking at this generation, with this conversation that we have now. And I think that's the only way that we're going to be prepared for where we want to be in the future, is have the diversity and the equity that's sitting at the table today.
I love that. Jay, you're going to get the last word here. So in 20 years, when we're all working for you, maybe as retired, well-paid consultants, what does it look like to you, Jay?
I want good benefits.
You want good benefits?
Benefits,
Benefits is benefits. You guys are the generation of benefits. No. 20 years from now, I think we look at it like this. And Gary, you made an interesting point. Careers are going to change, jobs are going to change. Some are going to be non-existent, some are going to get easier, some are going to evolve. I think it's constant upskilling, right? So, you look at colleagues of mine that, are a couple generations older than me. Hey, let me provide this perspective. Maybe you use AI or this specific AI platform and try it this way. It's not supposed to supplement your job, but it's supposed to give you context and a framework to what we're trying to do. Other times, and Teniqua, I'll use you as an example. I'll call you and I'll be like, listen, this is going on right now and I don't really know how to deal with this, and this is what I think I should do. And then you're like, okay, Jay, let's calm down.
Really good to know he does that with you, Teniqua. That's helpful.
It's mostly about you, Michael.
And you take that interpersonal skills that you've learned through your decades of professional experience and you say, okay, frame it like this, let's reframe this, let's reshape the narrative, and let's think about what you actually want to say when you go and have this conversation. So as much as I've said earlier, it's about perspective building with each other, but also providing opportunities to learn from and with each other. And I think that's what AI is going to help us and push us to be able to do in the next 20 years. Things are going to evolve, but as you said, change, the only thing that's constant is change.
We're gonna end the conversation there because that's a great place to end it. I will say we did a retreat. We do retreats annually, and we did a retreat. I don't know, 5, 6. It was pre-pandemic, so maybe 7 years ago, maybe 8 years ago. Cordell Carter from the Festival of Diaspora was actually our facilitator for one of the sessions, and he introduced why AI is going to change everything. And we ran a full day session on it with deep readings and discussion, and everyone was kind of like, "Oh, that's interesting." And so at the end of the retreat, of which that was a section, we went around and asked every person to say what they got most out of the retreat. And Charlie Broughton, who I think at the time was 92, 91 maybe, he stood up and he said, "What I took away from this retreat is that AI is the future and we got to get on board." And we all were like, "Oh, that's adorable." You know who got that right? Charlie Broughton. Everyone else had to get there. Charlie got it. And so it's that moment of if we just take the time to learn from each other, we're going to learn from each other. I appreciate all of you being here. I want to give your mom a shout out, Teniqua, who's watching from in there. Because we got to hold up, as a mama's boy, we got to hold up the moms. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for sitting outside. It is much hotter out here than it probably looks like on the camera, and we appreciate it. Thanks to Eddie for the production work on this, and Jamal Holtz for pulling it all together. Thank you all. We'll be back soon. Bye-bye.